Hey guys, this is Ihaterivers here. Today I'm going to go over a quick boom hand of one of my horses, Jacob Gold. This is the $55 Sunday Marathon, and in mid-position deep stacked he elects the 2X. I think he should be opening a little bigger than this, potentially up to 3X, if not at least 2.5X deep stack here. But whatever, he decides the 2X and he gets two callers. And he flops a flush draw with two overs and elects to bet 50%, which I think is completely standard, normal, and the only real option. Sizing could vary, I suppose. And he gets check raised from the small blind, almost 4x his bet. And his options at this point in a heads up pot are to either get it in here or to just call. I think we're a little too deep in general to want to get it in, but I don't think it would ever be a massive mistake. Although I think there's a good chance we're getting in versus a better flush sometimes, and we're getting in versus some sets. So I don't really like to just blast away here. He definitely has some weak hands that could potentially bluff us later, but some of his weak hands that continue hit our 9 or our 10, like he could have 8-9 of hearts, for example. So we could continue with that. We can also continue with any diamond, any 8. So we have quite a bit of continuation in us by just calling. So I think calling is the fairly standard correct play there. And on the turn, he decides to check into us. And I think that this is a little bit strange. I would think that he would barrel here if he had like the bear king of diamonds with like queen of hearts or something and wanted to play like this. So I don't think he has too many of those hands. He could definitely have sets for value. He could have 7-5 for value and potentially play like this. More often than not, I think he just has some give ups that check raised and now is complete air and he's just giving up. So I think Jacob Gold could definitely consider checking this back given the weakness of player 5's range, and also to simplify in case the guy does have a set. But overall, he decides to bet, and I think that's completely fine as well. And he faces a check call. At this point, I think that the small blind's range is pretty defined. Two sets, two pairs, some flushes that potentially wanted to play like this, and some ace X's that decided to check raise the flop. The most likely ace X that check raised the flop would probably be hands such as ace 3 or ace 4 with the gut shot and an overcard, and in particular ace 4 and ace 3 of hearts with the backdoor flush draw as well could potentially want to play like this. So I think that those would be the hands that are going to check call us, that we're getting value from, as well as the sets, of course. So also maybe ace 6 of hearts and some random combinations of things that I haven't thought of. Most of his check raise hands that were light are just going to check fold and give up at this point because they didn't improve with that ace. And then the river pairs the board and he checks to us. So now we have to consider if we want to value bet or not. And when to consider this, I made up a list of combinations that he could have. And the important thing to note is that if we bet and he folds, we had him beat, and checking back gets us the same equity. It doesn't matter, we're winning the pot either way. So the only things that really matter is the ratio of when he calls us that he has us beat compared to we have him beat. So if he check calls us with worse more often than he check calls us with better, then it's positive EV to value bet. But if he is check calling more often than not with the better hand, then we're giving up value. So when you start to look at the hands that can check call here that we have beat, there's really not many. There's 8-6 of diamonds potentially that I think would usually end up protecting with a bet on the turn. It could play like this. 4-3 of diamonds usually doesn't call pre-flop and usually would bet the turn. Ace 4 of clubs and spades and ace 3 of clubs and spades potentially could play like this and could call with worse. But he can no longer have the more likely ace X of hearts, like ace 6 of hearts and ace 3 and ace 4 of hearts, because the ace of hearts is on the board now. So when you add these up, I can't think of anything else that he can check call with that we have beat really on this river. So that's only 6 combinations. So if he has more than 6 combinations of value check calls that are trapping us, then we cannot profitably value bet this river. And when you consider the fact that he's very likely, or at least fairly likely, to play his sets of 7s and 5s, which is now a full house, as well as his pocket twos, that's already more than 6 combos. And if you add in his random ace-7 suiteds, his bigger flushes, and potentially some other random stuff that have us beat, then I just don't see any reason that we can value bet for profit here. So because more often than not, when he check calls, he has us beat probably about twice as much. So Jacob Gold elects to make a conservative yet correct check back on this board and saves himself a bunch of chips. It turns out he did have it, and more often than not he does, which is really all that matters. So well played by Jacob Gold. I hope you guys liked this lesson.